I'm Deb Cowley, as I mentioned earlier, with Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, and I'd like to welcome everyone in the room and those who are joining us via the phone and joining us virtually. Tonight is a hybrid public briefing on the Department of Energy's Hanford Site 5-year plan. This meeting will be recorded and we'll post it to the events calendar as soon as we can get it up. So the 5-year plan is to highlight major cleanup accomplishments that we anticipate over the next 5 years. We want to share our goals and celebrate these significant accomplishments together. We'd like you to please know that work on the site moves pretty steadily. The accomplishments here, they're a fresh piece of scope. So just know that we update these things as we move along. It's just an ongoing process to keep these things moving. Tonight's event is part of a 30-day public feedback period. It runs through November 10th. All comments are welcome. They must be submitted in writing. Email is preferred, but of course we take snail mail. And once you've sent your comments in, they all go up to headquarters and they're involved in helping plan the strategic vision for the future. Now, in an effort to be inclusive, we want to make sure everyone who's on Teams knows they can have translation services. To turn on your captions on your Teams, go to the upper right-hand corner, select language and speech, and then you can click on your live captions. And then you scroll to the bottom right of your screen, and please don't change spoken language. You want to change caption language, and then pick the language you desire. Again, please don't change the spoken language. We'll be using a chat box. Pauline has dropped the Hanford.gov events calendar link in there. It has all the material about how you submit your comments. Just go to Hanford.gov, the events calendar, and you can find it all there. I'd like to introduce our presenters and thank them all for coming. From DOE, we have Delmar Noyes, we have Roger Gordon. We'll be talking about tank farms. We have Better Dale. We'll be talking about Central Plateau, and Brian Harkins from Mission Oversight. We also have our regulators, David Bowen from the Washington State Department of Ecology. Thank you everyone for coming and participating. We ask that you hold your questions until all 6 of our presenters and regulators have had a chance to speak. So we will go ahead and get the meeting kicked off. And Delmar, please proceed.
Can everybody hear me? Good. Next slide, please. And one more. So as was shared, really the purpose of this overview briefing of our 5-year plan, and we're talking about is 23 through 28. 23 is the performance year we're in the next 5 years. We'll discuss that to our goals and objectives in 3 major cleanup areas. Our tank waste treatment mission, overall site-wide risk reduction activities, and then mission, site, and infrastructure support, those things that we all rely on the site to accomplish the mission. At this point, this is just a graphic of one of the pages of the 5-year plan.
Yes. The 5-year plan. We have the 5-year plan handy that you can pull up on the.
I'll start with this page as they pull that up. This is really a summary, and we'll talk in some depth of all these items on this chart, but this is a 1-page graphic intended to, at least at the highest level, show all of the major activities that we're planning to execute between fiscal year 24 through 28. Again, part of it is on the tank waste mission in green, risk reduction in red, and site infrastructure in blue. Again, one of the things I'll note here is this is all based off assuming no fiscal year 24 budget impacts from the ongoing congressional actions. Okay.
Just a sec.
And there are 2 to power.
Those in the room.
Patrick has it up, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick.
So keep working to get it up, and I'll go back to that when we get it up and I can speak to it. The point of that was I was gonna walk through the 5-year plan, the various pages, and give you kind of a high picture outline of what's in it before we dive into the details. And just be ready to show that and get that back.
Oh, you want it up here?
So,
Yeah.
virtually.
So. We get that. That's it. A couple of different computer systems up.
Okay, well, I'll continue while I work. Let's go next slide, please. So basically, as introduction, really, the 5-year plan lists the site's planned key accomplishments for the mission. And again, the focus here is, near term, the first 5 years, and major scope accomplishments, major things that we're going to accomplish that demonstrate the progress in the various areas, the key areas of the mission 4. It's intended to inform and integrate with our annual goals we set for execution. It also feeds to our integrated priority list and is associated with our budget formulation process. And as mentioned, also feeds forward to the environmental management EM's level strategic plans that not only address our sites, but all the sites that are in the environmental mission. And it really provides for us a tool to focus on our near-term mission objectives and the near-term strategies for Cleveland. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, 5 years, we have 23, which is our execution or recently completed fiscal year. And then this is a quick summary of the status from last year. And the individual will talk to their scope in more detail as appropriate. We talked about the 24 to 28 time period. But for 23, we set the goals to optimize the tank site seed removal system, also known as TISCR. This is the system that's providing the initial feed for hot commissioning of the waste plant. And that is up and running. In fact, it's running as we speak. We did not complete the heat up of the second melter for low activity waste. We do have the first melter up, and it is full of glass for the first time. And Roger here will talk some more about that in the path forward. But that was a major accomplishment in 23 and getting us well down the path of starting the commission to that facility. Once the second melter is heated up sometime in the early calendar year, we'll do the complete management assessment for the commissioning and move forward with that. We completed upgrades for the integrated disposal facilities. The one aspect of this was not completed is we didn't do the readiness activities, recognizing we don't want to bring individuals on and start that activity too soon. So that'll be executed early this fiscal year. Resumption of the 242A evaporators is currently scheduled for mid next year to initiate the next campaign, which is we're calling it campaign 11. It will be a series of evaporator campaigns. And we completed effluent treatment facilities upgrades this year. Those are all the upgrades necessary to support WTP operations. These facilities treat the secondary water from WTP operations. So those are complete. And we also completed construction and risk review for a new basin in the liquid fluid retention facility. This is a 6.5, 7 million gallon retention area that allows us to receive the WTP material and hold it while we treat it through the fluid treatment facility. This is an additional basin. We already have 3 that are operating. These support cross-site stormwater and those kinds of low-level materials for treatment across the site. For this reduction front, this year we completed construction of interim safe storage structure around the heat reactor, completed modifications of WESA, the waste encapsulation storage facility, and completed installation of the 324 building microfiber to support the soils, and initiated the installation of the capsule transfer systems. And the ladies and gentlemen will talk some more about that as we go into the out-year objectives. On the completion of the demolition of the north facility at the Purex facility, plutonium uranium extraction plant, the majority of that work was done in fiscal year 23. There's some residual work there with some worker tanks. And the demolition for prep activities for the B plant is moving forward and will be completed in the 24. Good and loaded of the high debris in the cave waste basin and completed the temporary ventilation for the reduction oxidation plant. And then on the mission and infrastructure support, we initiated configuration of export water systems. So just a quick summary of what was accomplished and some of the things are carrying over into 24 as to kind of update on where we're going.
Go ahead and remove that.
And the room is
Show it. Can you show it virtually?
I can, yeah.
Let's go ahead and show
You
the
have it
5
in there.
Let's go ahead and show the 5-year plan virtually.
Okay.
Everyone else, in the room, you have a copy.
Thanks.
It's up.
Thank you. So for those in the room, and virtually, I talked a bit about one of the front pages, which is a high-level summary of the objectives, and we'll go into that in more detail. The next page, where it's titled the 5-year plan. Again, this is on one side. I just have my copy folded in half. It says the 5-year plan. This is really the high-level summary. For those who are here, you talked about our core operations, waste treatment mission, risk reduction, and waste management, and then long with the goal of enhancing safety, maximizing risk reduction per tax dollars spent. And major components that we've been talking about, and we'll describe in the rest of the discussion, is the tank waste treatment, and then the risk reduction activities, and finally the mission and site infrastructure. And then kind of as we mentioned before, an enabling assumption here we're making is essentially stable funding at approximately $3 billion for the site as a whole. Then on the other side, take a quick look at that. For those in the room, I'm showing the second side. This side shows fiscal year 23, those were the objectives that I just briefly talked about. And then 24, 25 on the top here. These are the high level bullets of the objectives that the rest of the presentation will go into some detail and give you some description about what they're about, what we're trying to communicate. And obviously there'll be some questions at the end and what we're looking for on the feedback. In the context of that, one of the key messages that we're working internally and want to share with everybody here is this is built on increasing the pace of operations of the Hanford site as we get the waste plant up and running. We're feeding it and treating waste on a 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Activity level will go up significantly, as well as the risk reduction and then the site support activities as well to support that. DFLAW program is one of the key elements of that. And it's essential that the whole site moves in terms of the infrastructure and the mission support necessary to accomplish that and the risk reduction activities that we're doing. Basically, at the end of 28, our goal is to be actively treating 21 metric tons of glass per day and disposing those in an integrated facility and retrieving additional single shell tanks and resuming the construction of high level waste and continuing the critically important risk reduction mission activities that we'll outline here. And then Brian will speak to all the infrastructure needs that we needed to support that. That treatment rate is really equivalent of producing and removing enough supernatant to create nominally 1 million gallons of additional space. So fundamentally, a new double shell tank space with space that we can use to further retrieve single shell tanks and progress the mission. So just a quick outline of what is actually in the 5-year plan and the graphic that is kind of the tool for the communication that we'll share in more detail with you now. I apologize for that. So with that, I'll switch hats and now we'll start talking about the tank waste mission. And this is a combination of Roger and myself. So Roger, you want to kick us off?
Yep, so my name is Roger Gordon. I'm with the Waste Treatment Project. And as Delmar said, melter number 1 is heated up to 2100 degrees. and 31 inches of grit. We completed that. It's on dual heating, and we're hoping to do our first brick pour this week. Delta 1. And we're looking to get Delta 2 started heating that up in the middle of December. And then complete the checkout activities for Delta 2, and then roll into the contractor's full commissioning management assessment. What that does is just allow us to evaluate their readiness to accept hazards like ammonia and then simulated feed. So planning on the management assessment in the spring this year, and then complete full commissioning activity by the end of this year.
Thanks, Roger. And then for the tank waste mission moving forward on the tank farm side, we'll be initiating design of what we call the Advanced Modular Pretreatment System. And we always have to use acronyms, so we call it AMPS. But really what it is the longer term pretreatment capability to treat the supernatant so we can continue to feed the waste plant beyond the initial startup period. Just a reminder, the TISCR, the Tank Site Seasoning Removal System, which we started in January 22, that is currently operating, and we've processed about 650,000 gallons of waste so far. That's currently performing that function, but that was a more limited demonstration. This is that replacement capability. So we'll be initiating the design, getting our critical decision, which is our process of getting approval of congressional alignment to fund it in January, and working on the initial conceptual design. In addition to that, on the tank farm side, we'll complete the retrievals from AX tank farm. We're currently retrieving AX 101. That's the last of the 4 tanks in that tank farm system. It's currently 65% complete in the retrievals. We're currently in an outage for the next month or 2. We've been working on A farm, getting it ready for, that's the next farm with new retrievals in. The last 3 years doing upgrades, we had to trails up to all the electrical systems and support systems for A farm. So we're down for about another month. Then we'll resume the AX101 retrievals. When that's done in fiscal year 24, that will be the second tank farm that we've completed full retrievals of. It happens to be AX101, which is one we're working, has twice the volume of the other 3 tanks that we've already retrieved just by initial volume. So it's taking a little bit longer, using a little bit more space, but all that's the plan. So we'll complete that retrieval and initiate retrievals from the 3rd tank farms, and that one is A farm. So we'll begin in 24 retrievals of A101. That will be retrieved to our AP farm. And just so you're aware, the AX retrieval is currently being transferred to our AZ farm. All these retrievals in single shell tanks, moving that material over to the safer tank and tank double shell tanks, and then they're stored there until we treat it with low activity vitrification that Roger is working on top. In addition to retrieval, we will complete, in fact, we have completed the construction of the heat farm surface barrier. This was a commitment that was completed the last couple of weeks. Barrier, basically a specialized asphalt-like material that prevents water from entering the soils around the tank farms and diverts it away from the farm to an evaporation basin. So that construction is completed. The last of 4 that we had committed and agreed to with the state. And the last on this page is we are also upgrading our 222S laboratory. This is where all the tank farm samples are being done. We have 10 hot cells. These are cells that are specifically designed to allow analytical work to be performed on high radiation samples. They dilute it down, do some work in the hot cells, and the rest they dilute it down to where it can be taken out of those hot cells. We had some long-term issues with those windows, and we're replacing 6 of those hot cell windows. 2 have already been completed and 6 more in place. This is really to provide long-term visual quality windows so the operators can see through those windows and effectively operate inside those hot cells. The old design was a liquid, a mineral oil between 2 planes of glasses. We were getting some leakage as those gaskets degraded over time. So we're upgrading to a newer design which uses air purge between those glass windows, and that's all for clarity of vision. The radiological shielding function of the windows were unimpaired in either situation. But this will give us the long-term operability of lab support the mission. Next page. And Roger, you're right there.
So for fiscal year 2025, we're looking to complete the readiness review activities for WTP. Those will be both the contractor's operational readiness review and then DOE coming after that. Complete their readiness review to authorize what we call CD4A, which will authorize hot operations. And then, so what that means is we'll actually get real feed, maybe 106, no more.
Please speak into the microphone for folks on TV. And a little more.
Will be completing hot conditioning, which is just to making sure that we get the throughputs that we've designed to.
And next slide, please. Continuing for fiscal year 25.
So fiscal year 25, we're also resuming construction. The main focus for 25 is design with some limited construction for the high-level waste facility. And that's pretty much it for fiscal year 25.
And then on the tank farms front for fiscal year 25, we're going to be initiating retrievals and infrastructures for the next single shell tank farm. As I mentioned, that would be a farm, and that would be the A101 tank, which is the next one we do after that we complete the AX farm. And we have been working on the infrastructure activities for the tank farms after that, and I need to correct myself. This is actually the initiate infrastructure upgrades for the single shell tank farms after A and AX. So we've already done the A farm upgrades, as I mentioned. And in 25, we'll be beginning to upgrade for the next farm that's to be retrieved. And which one that is an item that we're still under discussion with the state. So at that point, we would have had AX done. C farm's already been done. So really that leaves B complex, T complex, and an SX and U farm complex as the remaining single shell tanks. Sorry, I got my notes wrong. So this would be really waste retrieval, water systems, electrical, ventilation systems, removal of old equipment, and preparing the tanks to install the new retrieval systems that are selected in the tank waste retrieval plans that are approved and discussed with the state. So in 25, we'll be preparing for that follow-on beyond A farm. And for 26, same thing. Roger, you start.
So for FY 26, the DF law will be operational. We're gonna go into an extended hot commissioning of 18 months to allow the contractor to basically work out the bugs of the facility to get up to the steady state throughput, which with both melters operating is about 3.5 containers a day. Unbelievable for 26.
Thanks, Roger. And mentioned earlier on, and this year we'll be working on AMPS. That new facility treatment is really designed to provide the long-term feed to continue feeding VFO operations in the extended hot commissioning and then the post-hot commissioning operations. In fiscal year 26, the tank farms will be initiating tank farm upgrades to support the future treatment of high-level waste. So as Roger had mentioned, we're moving forward with design and some limited construction activities to complete the construction of the high-level waste facility. And the tank farms in 26, we'll be looking and getting processes to prepare for providing high-level waste feed to the high-level waste melters. And just to give you some context, the high-level waste is really more the sludges and the insoluble materials. that tend to be the bulk of the highly radioactive materials, as well as the cesium that we're removing from the TISCR. Those materials are going to be the high waste components. So that is staging equipment, ventilation, mixer pumps, and ancillary waste transfer systems to move it from the double shell tanks to the waste treatment plant, high-level waste melters, and then additional capabilities that we'll need to be able to begin preparing for execution of high-level waste treatment. Again, this is vitrification in the facility that's under construction, the high-level waste facility. The DFLAW program is focused on the low-activity waste melter, which we're feeding the supernated that we're pre-treating by removing solids and the cesium. And then continuing with 5 years, fiscal year 27 is when we'll be initiating the physical construction activities of the Advanced Modular Pretreatment System, or the AMP system. And again, as I mentioned, this is the long-term system that will replace TISCR and ensure that we have and maximizing the use of the low-activity waste melter facilities to treat waste as fast as they can treat it. And next slide, please. In 28, on the tank farm side, we'll complete the waste retrievals from the A tank farms. So that's all of the tanks in A farm. And initiating construction of the West Area Risk Management Project and reactivating our cross-site transfer lines. So this is in the west area. Most all the activities we've been talking about so far in the east tank farm activity areas. This is conceptually would be a TISCR-like, AMPS-like treatment capability in the west area where we could directly treat the supernate for permanent treatment and disposal, as well as make more space to ensure we can maintain 222S operations and maximizing our operational flexibility for the long-term mission. Also in 28, we will be completing the construction of the surface barriers in B and T farms. I mentioned this year we completed the construction of U farm. This would be for B and T tank farms, and these commitments are consistent with what the state and the department agreed to in the administrative order associated with T19 and T11. So those barriers, imperial barriers that prevent water migration into the tank farms will be completed. I believe the next slide, we change subjects from the tank waste mission to the risk reduction mission.
Thank you. My name is Heather Dale, and I'm the Assistant Manager for River Plateau. I'll start off briefing two of the critical activities that we'll be doing that are carryovers from fiscal year 23. That includes completing the demolition of the Pyrrhus North facility complex. A majority of the work of the demolition is completed, and we just have minimal scope remaining. So we're planning on a final clean closure forecast date of February 2024. We're also going to complete demolition preparation at the plutonium concentration facility near Fleet B plant, and that's forecasted for May 2024. In addition, we're going to do the characterization, dewatering, and grouting of the K West Basin to allow for demolition. We're currently completing preparations for dewatering the basin and expect to complete dewatering of the basin in February. Testing of the dewatering system is also complete, and we have verified that the K Basin waste, after going through the dewatering filtration system, will meet the EFT waste acceptance criteria. So dewatering and grouting should be completed by July of 2024. We're also going to complete demolition preparation for the plutonium metallurgy lab and the plutonium concentration facility next to B plant Canyon. In addition, we're going to remove the redox plutonium recovery hood to enable removal actions within the north sample gallery. And finally, we'll work to obtain the record of decision, or ROD, for the 100K West area. And this will allow for final groundwater cleanup near the K East and K West reactors. Moving on to 2025, Following the basin dewatering and grouting, we'll start demolition of the K West Basin. We'll also initiate demolition of the plutonium concentration facility and the plutonium metallurgy lab, as well as obtain a 100N area record of decision. And this will allow the interim action record of decision cleanup levels to ensure they're adequate or identify areas where additional remediation is needed. And last but not least, we'll initiate removal actions of the Purex and D plant facility. This includes removal of chemical and production lines and associated glove boxes, as well as excess equipment. For fiscal year 2026, we're going to initiate transfer of the cesium and strontium capsules to the dry storage area. We're going to remove all the mixed waste containers from outside storage. We're going to complete demolition activities at ancillary facilities that supported the B plant. We're going to initiate characterization of plutonium concentration facility, which must be completed prior to demolition preparation. And we're going to initiate the certification process for contract handle transuranic waste or true waste. True waste destined for disposal at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant Project, or WIP, must be certified for meeting waste acceptance criteria prior to transportation. This activity will initiate the certification process by processing a container of the contract handled true waste for shipment to WIP. And finally, we'll initiate remediation of waste sites and placement of apatite barriers, and this will include cleanup remedies for select waste sites in the 100 area, as well as support for ongoing groundwater remediation river corridor. And moving on to fiscal year 2027, we're going to complete demolition of the K West Basin. This demolition will involve digging out the grouted basin and shipment by truck to the ERDIP facility for disposal. We're going to initiate characterization and hazard abatement activities at Purex. The hazardous materials include asbestos, beryllium, and remaining processing equipment. Similarly, we're going to continue characterization activities at redox to identify where hazards need to be mitigated prior to the starting of demolition. And we're going to initiate enhanced soil cover installation at cesium waste sites in the 200 area. This means adding several more feet of gravel to prevent any spread of contamination. And we're going to complete construction of the ERDIP Supercell 11. This is an expansion to ERDIP, the circular disposal facility. It is required to support waste remediation and facility disposition throughout the Hanford site. The expansions are known as supercells and will limit previous constructed expansion. And of course, looking to 2028, we're going to complete transfer of the cesium and strontium capsules to dry storage. We'll initiate shipments of the true waste to WIP in New Mexico. And with the completion of the transfer of the cesium and strontium capsules to dry storage, the waste encapsulation and storage facility, or WESA, can begin deactivation activities in preparation for demolition. And finally, we'll initiate stabilization of retired ventilation system at the B plant. And with that, those cover the risk reduction activities for the 5-year plan. And over to Delmar. Oh, not Delmar.
So, we're looking ahead at mission and site infrastructure. To be able to continue the Hanford cleanup mission, we not only have to maintain the systems that are there, we have to upgrade for systems that are aged or ready for replacement. We also have to move ahead of the work activities to ensure there's infrastructure in place to support those cleanup mission activities. So starting with fiscal year 24 this year, we anticipate initiating construction on the mission critical electrical distribution feeders in the 100 area. So currently, right now, we have a upgrade to a 230 kV volt line that goes through the site. BPA is partnered with us. They're doing the construction work. That line not only feeds power to the Hanford site, but it also supplies the backup power to Energy Northwest. And so that line is being replaced because of its aged and degraded. And with that line upgrade comes a change in how our site distribution, electrical distribution system works. And so to maintain our redundant backup power systems to support the 100 area, there's some line installations that have to, feeders that have work that has to be done in the 100 area. For fiscal year 25, we're hoping to start up the Central Plateau Water Treatment Facility that's under construction right now. So we are replacing an existing water treatment system that uses chlorine gas, and is a health hazard for the workers in the area if you have a chlorine gas leak. It's also a very old system, so we're moving to a more modern system, and I anticipate startup in 25. Associated with that is a potable water storage tank in the 200 West area. The existing reservoir is an open top concrete structure. It has a leak that prohibits us from fully filling the containment. And so again, it's ripe for replacement. So that potable water tank is currently under construction right now. As I mentioned, the 230 kV 25, it is targeted for hookup or energization or an outage at the 2025. We anticipate initiating replacement of some of the electrical distribution poles. Those are upgrades and modernization for old poles that need to be replaced. And we anticipate completion of the fire protection infrastructure for the Central Plateau raw water system. So these are upgrades to our fire water system distribution for the site. Next slide, please. Fiscal year 26, we anticipate completion of the new water feed lines for mission critical facilities in 200 West. So as we build the new systems that we need to support the mission for decades to come, one of the outstanding areas of need has been the water pumping stations down the river. Pretty interesting to go visit. You go down there, for operations back in the day, they had a lot of pumps. The name tag on those things, they were manufactured in 1943. We're still using some of those pumps. So this project will upgrade those systems. With the upgrades comes some modernization that gives us control and replaces a number of the systems to streamline the process for feeding water up to the Central Plateau. For fiscal year 27, we anticipate completing reconfiguration of the export water systems in the 100D area and initiating reconfiguration upgrades for water systems in the 100B area and initiate the cross-site sanitary water system between the 200 East and 200 West. The 200 West, we've built an evaporated sewer lagoon so that we're not discharging liquids into the soils. And part of that process is currently those systems that we have the opportunity to, we're trucking the sewage waste from the east over to the west. And so this is installing a transfer line to eliminate the trucking of that waste. Will also allow us to take some of the existing systems that are still on a standard disposal system Round blank, leach fields, yes, thank you very much, leach fields. And put those on into the pumping into the lagoon. So the lagoon, again, eliminates discharge to the soil column. The liquids evaporate and the solids are captured, solidified, and disposed of better. And then finally, for fiscal year 28, we anticipate completion of a new fire station in the Eastern Plateau. So as we move forward with the cleanup mission, the recognition was that most of the work will be on the 200 Plateau area. So we're working towards new fire stations that are well beyond their original anticipated life. The first one will be in the 200 East with the bit plant operations. So it'll be near that location. Later on, outside of the 5-year window here that we see here, there will be a second station with 200 West to support, again, continued mission once there. With that, back to you, David.
It's time for our regulator perspective now. Gentlemen, would you please be sure to have the microphone turned on?
I just turned mine on, and so it's working. All right, well, yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for the presentation from our partners over there at the Department of Energy. My name is David Bowen. I'm the Nuclear Waste Program Manager for the Washington State Department of Ecology. And we echo many of Energy's cleanup priorities and the work they've outlined for the next 5 years. We want to share some observations from the presentation mixed with our agency's main priorities for the next few years as well, along with some ongoing efforts. So priorities for us are issuing the Hanford Site permit Rev 9 for public comment, completing holistic negotiations with Energy and EPA and the Department of Justice. The agencies are currently putting the conceptual agreement into writing and will be holding public comments once that is complete and public announcement is made. We'll be holding public comment and issuing research development demonstration permits for the testbed initiative phase 2, which will allow Energy to retreat 2,000 gallons of tank waste at Hanford ground and dispose of it off-site. And then the Newcon project purpose is to evaluate the effectiveness of a particular control technology, reducing the concentrations of target tank constituents in air emissions from Hanford tanks. So we've been working on those diligently. I've been here for 3 years. It starts and stops with the testbed initiative. The Newcon's kind of been ongoing throughout that period of time. We're getting close on both of those. We will continue to support permitting needs for the direct feedback activity waste. And we're excited to see waste vitrification begin for sure. We provide technical assistance in permitting to support operational readiness. We support the demonstration test plan for melters and off-gas systems. And we're doing everything we can to ensure DFLAW is up and running by August 2025. Another thing is that we need to make our own adjustment in our operations to make sure we're ready to support 24/7 operations of facilities. We'll look into that as well. A couple of observations in the presentation, and they may be that they didn't meet the level for detail, or maybe they're not going to happen in the next 5 years, but we didn't notice anything on the remedial investigation feasibility study or the circuit precision document activities for the Central Plateau, which is, like I said, could indicate not planning to do that kind of work in the next 5 years, or maybe it didn't make the cut for the presentation, but we are starting to engage with Energy and EPA on Central Plateau milestone negotiations, and that will lay out the path forward for the next several years. So we expect to have continued conversations on the approach. And then on these cesium and strontium capsules, moving those to dry storage. Current plan isn't slated to meet the August 2025 milestone. We understand this may be due to supply chain issues and some other issues. We're working with Energy to meet this obligation as soon as possible. And our agency and other ongoing efforts. Our agency continues to monitor progress with the waste isolation pilot plant permit renewal. We're working closely with Energy to ensure they meet key objectives in 26 and 28 for Hanford's transuranic mixed waste transportation. Some other ongoing efforts for us is to continue to support regulatory reviews of circular decisions and progress on groundwater pump and treat. Enhance our efforts to bring attention to the need for additional cleanup funding at Hanford, and then expand our public outreach and involvement to better engage overburdened and underserved communities. So again, I'd like to thank Energy for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to the continuing conversation and working together.
I'm Craig Cameron with EPA. I'm project manager here in the Hanford Project Office. And speaking for EPA,
I'm not sure the mic's on.
Oh, there, I didn't hold it down long enough. Is that good? Okay, sorry. I guess I had to hold the button. So, yeah, I'm Craig Cameron with the local EPA office, Hanford Project Office, and I want to thank the audience, both here present and online, and also Department of Energy for providing this opportunity for us to give you feedback on your plan. There are a few things in the plan that we are glad to see, such as the ROTS for 100K and 100N, the K basins work, and the Supercell 11 expansion. As David mentioned, the plan is light on the Central Plateau RFS and cleanup of soil overuse. There are a multitude of milestones in abeyance that are to be renegotiated in 2024 after we do some resource modeling work. And so we expect that work to progress, even if that has to be spread out over time. That's important to us. There's also there's some emphasis on, there's some things in here that are tied directly to some milestones, but there's not a lot of emphasis on existing milestones. And we see some of the critical things that are critical in the near term are the preliminary and intermediate designs for the 61811 remediation and an update of the remedial design, remedial action work plan for the, including an updated schedule for 61811. That's the waste site that's over near Energy Northwest. And then also a milestone for completing interim response actions for 100K. The D&D, we appreciate the D&D for 105K West fuel storage basin is listed. Initiate the soil remediation under 100K West, that's another one that's important to us. And then, you know, the 324 building continues to remain a priority for us to keep that going and to deal with that contamination that's under it. We also understand that, and maybe just to make your list, like David was saying, but there's the 200 IA1, that's the new OU that we created to put a bunch of simple shallow sites that can be taken care of as time goes on, can be remediated to, you know, to get things moving in the 200 area and also provide a source of contaminated soil to ERDA. That characterization is going to go forward this spring, and I'm not sure why that kind of thing is not being mentioned. So I'd like to take that into consideration, put that down, because it sounds like it's going to happen. And then also, while doing building decontamination demolition is important, we want to see a balance of that work with waste site investigation and remediation. This helps employ a diverse set of skilled workers. It also means a more efficient use of the environmental restoration disposal facility. And part of what I mean by that is that, you know, for every piece of rubble that we bring in from building D&D, or even from a waste site cleanup, you have to have a fair amount of material to go with it to be able to compact the entire, you know, the entire waste swarm in ERDA. And so that, you know, at times we've had to use clean fill in place of contaminated soil, and that's to me not a real efficient use of the space. And also, you know, we dug out all the stuff to make those big holes in the ground for those cells, and now just putting some of that material back in doesn't seem very efficient. So that's one of the reasons why we want to see a balance of things going forward. And like I've said before, I think we need to be able to walk and chew gum here and keep the various parts of the Hanford cleanup going. We need to keep groundwater remediation, soil OU cleanup, building D&D, bit plant tank farms going, and no one thing should be at the expense of the others. We understand that there may be some funding issues and technical problems, but we need to maintain progress. We also believe that we can clean up the site safely. Finally, I'd like to point out that we have some cleanup work authorized, but with some decision documents, but those are kind of getting on the shelf. So that's something that we'll continue to press if people want something that's kind of shovel ready. And then finally, if efforts are needed to shift something, then we have to have the information to help make the decisions on that and want to be able to participate with DOE and ecology to figure out what we want. If we need to change milestones, we can do that. I know that DOE has talked about the adaptive milestone approach, and we hope that we will be using that, and that some of these things are, you know, it's a 5-year window, and you've got different timeframes for the negotiated milestones and those kind of things. So hopefully there's some flexibility there so that we can actually negotiate good faith. So that's all I really have. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for everyone who's spoken, everyone who has come and listened. Now it's time to hear your questions. If you're in the room, raise your hand. If you're on Teams, please drop your question in the chat. Colleen will read those. If you're on the phone, *6 to unmute, and then go back on mute, hit *6, and start with Tom. What?
Yeah, so I think it's a great improvement over past year's tables, including a little more detail on the risk reduction side. I do echo, I would hope to see more characterization and soil sites. Maybe they're not as appealing as changing the skyline, but they are important. I guess a question that's been persistent in I guess this is the 4th time we've done the placemat, is that something we've been looking for is a companion table that lists the milestones for all of these bullets. So there's a quick one-to-one reference that we can say, oh, this 100K rod, that's milestone blank, so we can look and see. So if there's an ability to make just an Excel sheet and put it on Hanford.gov as well, it would help crosswalk.
A question in the chat, Colleen?
Yes, we have a question in the chat from Dwayne Schmilker, and there's an initial question and then some clarification, so I'll read through that. So the question is, how many gallons of law will be processed per year in 25? About how many, or how about when the plant is at a steady state? The metric tons of glass metric doesn't provide a feel for how many gallons of waste is being worked off annually. And then he kind of summarizes the question. In short, what he's looking for is the number of gallons of waste per year that are actually going to be processed through DF-LAW based on its projected uptime and throughout capacity, so that one can determine how long the DF-LAW plant has to operate to work off the volume of law in the tanks. This is especially important given the volume of water that must be added for waste retrieval and transfer. Thanks.
Okay, I think I'll take a shot at that one. Good question, thank you. Obviously, everything, the complicated answer, the translation to metric tons of glass to waste isn't a one-for-one. It's dependent on a lot of chemical and sodium concentrations. The short answer, though, just kind of at the nominal level, is a couple of things. One is when we're up and running, and beyond the startup and running at essentially nameplate, we believe will be, as I mentioned earlier, removing or treating essentially the equivalent of about 1 million gallons of supernate, or making 1 million gallons of new space available in the tanks by removal and treatment of that supernate liquids. It'll change a little bit over time, and that includes all considerations of secondary streams and anything going back to the tank farms. So essentially, that kind of year, that's a per year basis. Yeah, when things are up and running on a steady state. Now, the CARES Fund, we all understand that the law facility is not sized to complete the treatment for the law treatment mission. Never has been. The modeling in the cases, it's something around 50% or less. So we know, and the state know that we're in dialogues. We'll be over the mission life cycle on that additional law treatment capability. So, if you look at the life cycle, you try to say how much supernate there's and just apply the low activity waste facility throughput. That math doesn't work because we know that's not the appropriate characterization or capability that we'll need to execute the mission in a reasonable time period. And again, we have a supernate that's in the tanks, so we have double shell tanks. I think there's nominally 18, 19 million gallons of supernate. But as we continue the triple mission and take the single shell tanks, which a lot of that is salt cake, which you dissolve and make into a supernate or a liquid waste form, that'll just add to the volume. So the short answer is that roughly on an annual basis, we'll be removing about 1 million gallons of supernate, making that space available for additional retrievals on a kind of a nominal perspective. There isn't a one-for-one comparison on metric tons of glass to gallons of waste retrieved out of the tank due to chemical compositions and a lot of complications. So it isn't a one-for-one. Typically, glass loading is limited by sodium content in most of our waste forms. So that's really typically the maximum constituent before or to ensure that we get high quality glass. So I hope that just gave the initial cut at the question. And this key messages though is that law facility treatment capability, we know, and by design isn't sufficient for the full mission. So we'll get it up, run it, maximize our capability. What it does for us is removing the liquid component in the double shell tank, which is the most mobile. So this is the largest immediate hazard to the environment. And it makes us additional space so we can continue the single shell tank retrievals and backfill with each retrieval.
Is there a question on the phone? *6 to unmute. Might not have anyone on the phone.
I don't see any right now.
Chris with a hand up.
I have several questions and a comment. Comment first. I endorse what Tom said about having milestones on the various bullet items here. Could be extremely happy to be able to relate work to milestones. Now, as far as questions, you mentioned that your plan here assumes about 3.0 billion stable funding per year, at least for this 5-year period. Have you had discussions or made plans? What if you only got 2.5 billion per year? What would you let slide and what would priorities be? Or conversely, what if dreams happen and you got 4.0 or 5.0 billion per year? How would you accelerate or what would you accelerate? Have you had these kinds of discussions or maybe plans for these kind of contingencies?
Yeah, we give a shot at that.
I just would mention that Hanford has a very well-developed model that we call an integrated priority list. And as our funding adjusts, it helps us draw that line of what we're able to do with the funding. And so we use that extensively for planning the out years. What you see here is the culmination of that integrated planning, integrated priority list, excuse me. And so yes, we have planned for what could we do if we were funded more and what would happen if we were funded less. And it's an annual process. It's a 5-year process. It's part of the federal budgeting process. We'll start working on fiscal year 26 here soon. Budgets and that integrated priority list is the tool to help us develop our inputs to the fiscal year 26.
My next question is about 324, actually the waste site below it, 300-296. There's no mention of that in here, so presumably whatever's going to happen with it is going to happen post 2028. But can you maybe talk a little bit about what discussions have you been having with agencies, where things might stand with that right now, even if tentatively?
The reason it's not on the list is because we're still in active discussions with the Environmental Protection Agency and with the state as to what the path forward should be. So we don't necessarily know what it looks like. We're going through a lot of the technical information right now. So as soon as we have an idea of what that future looks like, that is a priority and it would fit into this plan somewhere, but we just can't include it right now because we don't know what that looks like until we complete our discussions.
Okay.
I can comment on that too for EPA. So that's one of our leads. I think what you're saying is correct, that we're in discussions. We have asked DOE to provide us with an evaluation of what it would take to do it the way it's called up in the record of decision. And because they presented an alternative path forward or order of doing things that doesn't completely match with the ROD. So in our feeling, we need, we will have to make a change to the record of decision because that ROD is signed by us and DOE, and it's our remedial authority being used. But, we just want to know, we just want to be able to fairly compare the options and then help DOE decide what to do. So that's kind of where we're at. So I can understand why they didn't have it on here, and I didn't mention it directly, partly because of that. I just mentioned that 324 and that wayside, of course, are important for us to deal with.
I guess my last question is both for Heather and you, Craig. Is it reasonable to expect to get 100K ROD in 2024? You just submitted the RA report, draft 0, which is 1,800 and some odd pages. And by the time EPA goes through that, if they have any comments to respond, that's going to take time. The feasibility study has to be submitted. There's going to be comment responses back and forth with that. Then the proposed plan has to be written. There's going to be comment responses back and forth with that. And then EPA has to write the ROD, and that has to go through an approval process. That sounds like an awful lot of paperwork going back and forth to be able to get that ROD at the end of 2024.
Yeah, and that's not my project, but it sounds like you're answering your own question with all the things you're bringing up. So I'm not sure what the answer is. It may take longer than that.
And we've been working with the EPA on what that process looks like and analyzing cases where it's gone very well and what did we do that made it work well. So the plan is to look at those best practices and see how we can improve our operations so that maybe we can see some efficiencies in that space as well.
See another question in the chat, correct, Colleen?
Correct.
I have several questions, but my first one is very simple. How many people are online?
Looks like we have 15 people online, roughly. 4 of those are us working. So, yeah.
So I noticed that from FY 2023, there's 6 carryover projects that are passing on to 2024. And I'm just wondering how realistic it is to add those projects on. There's other projects that have been listed that aren't even on the map, the placemat. How realistic is that scope of the activities from 2023 plus 2024 plus what's not on there?
So I can get a shot, and I mean, part of our planning, like I think Brian mentioned, is multi-year and informed by the previous year. So, obviously this plan is updated based on our performance in 23. And we shared, many of those actions, although they're not totally done, a large part of the physical work was done. So the completion of those are something that we factor in and is factored into the ongoing, path forward. And obviously we're talking, in this case, at this level, the 5-year plans, fairly high level physical completion kind of activities. There's thousands and thousands of other activities that are going forward, but those are recognized and captured moving forward in our planning.
Under FY 2028, it said reactivate the cross-site transfer line. I've heard a while ago that the cross-site transfer line isn't gonna work. Can you speak to that, and will it need to be replaced, or what's the plan there?
So, I mean, the plan is we have the backup. So we have 2 cross-site transfer lines. And what we're talking about for everybody else is East Tank Farms is where the bulk of the activities are. That's where waste treatment plant is. In West Tank Farms, which have a lot of our single shell tanks, are about 70 miles away. And the farthest tank farm is about 10 miles away from WTP, which is where the bulk of the treatment will be done. These are the cross-site, i.e. the lines that go from one side to the other. They have been installed. The SuperNAV, and there's 2 lines. One is specifically designed for SuperNAV. It has been successfully used in the past, but it's been a long time ago. Neither one are currently active or are currently in the RCRA permit, the double shell tank system under ecology, so they're not usable from a operational perspective at this point. This activation would be to do everything that's necessary to make them usable within the RCRA permitting. They exist. We believe they can be effectively activated. The second one is a cross-site sludge line, cross-site, specifically designed for sludges. Those are a bit more difficult to move. It has pump stations and stuff. That system was constructed and never operated, so it hasn't been operated. So the additional work to get that operational probably a little bit higher, but there's no reason to believe that the physical conditions and our ability to upgrade them as necessary, working with the state on current permitting requirements. We believe that those will be able to activate those not as is, but with minor, changes and upgrades to the current standards and expectations.
So you're not looking at replacing the lines, like the minor upgrades, what would be done?
Well, based on, for example, the SuperNAV would be, inspections, testing, qualifications, working with the state, making sure the current leak detection system meets the requirements. There may be some upgrades, testing necessary. The sludge line, for example, we have pumping stations that are needed to move the sludges. It's long ways to go. The sludges, the solids basically are mixed with water and they have to move at a certain speed or they settle out. We may have to add additional pump stations into the line. But it's not a vision that we won't be able to use those essentially new lines. They're all, were constructed in the, I guess, a relatively near term as we talk in the tank ones.
Just to clarify, those lines are 10% solid design? From some solids or?
I'd have to go back and look at the design, what the percentage we transfer, but the solids are essentially mobilized with liquid and then transferred at a certain percentage. I don't know off the top of my head, consistent with how we've operated the tank farms for decades. There's a known concentration that we have high confidence that we can move without them stopping. And the concern is this, if you don't keep moving fast enough, it would stop, fall out, and potentially flood the lines. We can take the action to get the exact percentage we transfer at, but it's in that range. So anyway, the short answer is yes, we believe we can reactivate the existing lines. There will be upgrades and probably some, I use the term minor, but additional pump stations and some significant work, but it won't be replacing. We have no reason to believe that at this point.
That's helpful, because I was under the impression that the whole approach needed to be
change something.
Yeah, I mean, the solid sludge lines have never been used, so there's a lot of opinions in terms of, well, it can't ever be used. I've heard the rumor as well, but there's no technical reasons. We did detailed studies, I think it was like 8 to 9 years ago about reactivating those and have the cost estimates and scope estimates associated with it. But ultimately, we'll be working with the state to make sure that, because, the permits, since they were designed and the requirements are slightly different, so there'll be some upgrades necessary to meet today's standards in terms of big detection system, I think is the biggest, and pump stations is the other biggest one.
I'm not seeing any more questions on the call or the chat. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I've only been working on the Hanford site for about a month. I didn't sign in, but I worked for Intera doing some groundwater modeling. So with my brief knowledge about the site, I have hopefully high level and easy questions for fiscal year 2024. I was looking at the dewatering of K West Basin, just a basic question, is that basin lined or is it connected to the Vado Stone?
Heather's deputy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was at the back of the room. So your question is by line?
Yeah, no, is there a lining underneath the basin? Or is it connected to the soil?
It's concrete, so it's connected to
Okay.
the soil, yes, and it's not a lined basin.
Okay, cool. My second question, another super basic one, hopefully, is when you demolish facilities, which there's a lot of those, where did those materials go to?
They go to the environmental restoration disposal facility if they meet the ERDA waste acceptance criteria. So most of our waste or building rubble goes to ERDA, as Craig mentioned earlier.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Just for those of you who are curious, this is Mark French. He's with DOE. He's been with us for a long time. So thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions in the room? Okay, let's double check. Any questions in the chat? Last call. If anyone's on the phone, it's star 6 to unmute. We'd love to answer your questions. And last call for questions in the room. All right, seeing that, we would like to thank everyone for coming. Quick special thanks to our team, to Patrick Conrad, our manager, to Mary Ann, to Dustin, and to Colleen, and for everyone for participating. This is the conclusion of the 5-year plan public meeting, and we hope you have a wonderful, safe drive home. With that.
I was the last meeting.
Yeah.